Story 1. The Milk Carton Girl. The disappearance of Anissa Hope. She vanished on her way to school. No trace, no clues. But 16 years later, her picture showed up in someone else's family photo album. It was just another Tuesday in Brindle Lake, Ohio. January 9th, 1983. One of those mornings when the snow falls light but steady, powdery and silent, covering the trees like powdered sugar on a sleeping cake. The whole world looked gentle that morning, as if nothing bad could happen while the earth wore its softest coat. The town was quiet, like it always was, nestled between frozen lakes and the smell of old pine. No one locked their doors back then. Nobody thought they needed to. 9-year-old Anissa Hope woke up before her alarm. She always did on Tuesdays. It was music class day, her favorite, and her school was hosting a winter showcase in a few weeks. Anissa had been practicing her recorder diligently, even though she hated how squeaky it sounded. Her teacher said she had good breath control for her age. She wanted to impress her. Her mom, Patricia, made her oatmeal and packed a thermos of hot cocoa. Her dad, Dale, had already left for work. Anissa dressed herself in a red coat, the one with the little heart patch on the elbow, and pulled on her boots. She stuffed her lunch into her blue backpack, waved to her mother from the front door, and left for school. It was only 4 blocks away. She never made it there. Patricia noticed something was wrong around noon. The school hadn't called, but something gnawed at her. A strange cold weight sat in her chest that wouldn't go away. She called the elementary office, expecting to hear her daughter had forgotten her lunch or left a book behind. But when the secretary said Anissa hadn't shown up at all, Patricia's breath caught in her throat. She dropped the phone and ran outside barefoot, screaming her daughter's name down the street. By 1 p.m., the police were called. By 3 p.m., a search party had formed. By sundown, Brindle Lake was in chaos. It didn't make sense. Anissa was a good kid, shy but not fearful, curious but cautious. She walked the same path to school every day. Everyone knew her, and she knew everyone. There were no tire marks in the snow, no signs of struggle, just footsteps that trailed for half a block and then vanished. Police brought in dogs, canvassed every home, every yard, every shed and culvert. They checked the pond. They called nearby towns. No one had seen her. Nothing had been reported. Dale and Patricia held on to each other, shaking, faces drained of color as their little girl simply disappeared into the snow. The town froze in time. The first few days were frantic. Volunteers trudged through snowdrifts, combing woods with flashlights, hoping for something, anything. Patricia didn't sleep. Dale punched a wall and broke 2 fingers. Every hour that passed became heavier than the last. Anissa's face was plastered on flyers, pinned to telephone poles and grocery store bulletin boards. A local news station ran her story, and within days, she became one of the first children to appear on the sides of milk cartons in Ohio. Her photo, a shy smile, crooked teeth, brown eyes full of life, haunted the state. Still, there was nothing, not a single lid. Weeks passed, then months. The Hopes stopped opening their mail. Most of it was condolences or letters from self-proclaimed psychics. Some sent hateful accusations. Others offered false hope. Patricia kept a shoebox of letters she couldn't bear to read. Dale started drinking. Their house grew quiet and cold. The life they'd built around Anissa faded like fog from a window pane. The Brindle Lake police eventually admitted they had nothing. No suspects, no motive, no evidence. It became one of those mysteries people whispered about in diners. Parents held their children a little tighter. Strangers earned second glances. And over time, life went on. By 1987, the case had gone entirely cold. By 1991, the town barely spoke of her. By 1998, she was a ghost. Then in 1999, 16 years after she vanished, a widow named Lucille Bertrand found something in an attic in Sacramento, California, that would turn everything upside down. Lucille had been married to Harold Bertrand for 15 years. He died that spring from lung cancer. He was quiet, reserved, never talked about his past. A retired appliance technician, Harold spent most of his days in the garage fiddling with old electronics. Lucille had never seen the attic. Harold kept it locked. She assumed it was filled with old tools or tax documents. When she finally climbed up there on a gray Thursday afternoon, she found a locked metal trunk wedged behind a stack of yellowed newspapers. She pried it open with a crowbar. Inside were hundreds of photographs, Polaroids, some faded, others crisp, some dated, others not. Each one featured a child. Some smiled, some didn't. All were alone. Lucille's hand shook as she flipped through them. She had no children, no nieces or nephews. She didn't recognize a single face. Her stomach turned. She called the police. Sacramento PD responded immediately. They seized the trunk and began cataloging the images. A few of the children were familiar. A detective recognized one face from a case file he'd studied in the academy. They ran the photos through a database. That's when they found her, Anissa Hope. The photo was dated January 9, 1983. She was standing on a snowy sidewalk, clutching her thermos, red coat zipped to her chin. The exact outfit she wore the morning she disappeared. It had to have been taken within minutes, maybe seconds, before her abduction. The FBI was brought in. They flew agents to Ohio and to Sacramento. Interviews were conducted. Lucille was cooperative, shocked, horrified. She had no knowledge of Harold's past. Their marriage had been quiet, unremarkable. But Harold's past wasn't. Records revealed that Harold Bertrand had been a long-haul trucker in the early 1980s. He worked for a regional shipping company with roots all across the Midwest. Pay stubs placed him in Ohio on January 9, 1983. He had checked into a motel just 12 miles from Brindle Lake. His logbooks were sparse. Most entries were vague, missing locations, or fabricated. No one had ever looked at him as a suspect before. He had no priors, no complaints, no children of his own. But the photographs told a story. Investigators discovered 5 other children among the photos who had been reported missing between 1981 and 1987. None of the cases had ever been connected. They were now. The FBI dubbed him the Phantom Collector, a predator who used his job as a cover, who crossed state lines with ease, who left no traces. But there was more. Behind one of the photos was a handwritten note, a set of GPS coordinates. They led to a forest in Nevada just outside Reno. Agents followed the lead, digging for days near an old hiking trail. What they found made seasoned men cry. A sealed wooden trunk, rotted from time, buried beneath a collapsed tree. Inside, wrapped in layers of blankets, were human remains. Dental records confirmed it was Anissa Hope. It was over, or so they thought. Patricia collapsed when she got the call. She hadn't spoken publicly in years. She had rebuilt a quiet life in Arizona, remarried, found some sliver of peace. But now, she knew where her daughter had gone and who had taken her. She didn't know how to feel. The FBI wanted more. They returned to Sacramento, searched the house again. Lucille, still cooperative, handed over everything she found. That's when they discovered the VHS tape. It was in a manila envelope labeled only, "For Me." Inside was a standard home video cassette. The label was blank. The FBI played it in a secure lab. The screen flickered, and Harold Bertrand appeared. He sat in a folding chair in his garage, expression calm, eyes distant. The tape lasted 22 minutes. He spoke softly. He described how he chose them. He said he could see the sadness in their eyes. He said he was rescuing them from a world that would ruin them. He called himself a preserver. It was delusional, chilling, inhuman, but it was the last 60 seconds that shook agents to their core. Harold looked directly at the camera and smiled. "You'll only find 5, he said. "But there were 6. He paused. "And the last one is still alive." The screen went black. Those last words sent shock waves through the task force. The last one is still alive. It didn't make sense. Bertrand had been dead for months. There was no way to interrogate him, no way to verify if it was real or another layer of his madness. But they had to know. The FBI combed through every photo in the lockbox again, this time with new urgency. They triple-checked missing persons reports across all 50 states. They used facial recognition. They contacted local precincts, social services, even amateur sleuth forums. Every lead, no matter how small, was followed. Weeks passed. Then a technician noticed something in a photo from 1993. A girl, around 12, sitting in a booth at a roadside diner, eyes wide, head tilted slightly. The photo was taken from outside the window. She wasn't looking at the camera, she was staring just past it. Behind her sat a woman with curly blonde hair, wearing sunglasses indoors. The photo was dated July 12, 1993. Utah. The FBI ran the girl's face through every available database. No match. No missing person fitting her description. No one in the surrounding area recalled a girl matching her features. Who was she? Was she the 6th? Was she still alive? Lucille was interviewed again. She had no recollection of ever meeting children. Harold, she said, traveled often during the early years of their marriage. He claimed it was for work, fixing out-of-town machinery, helping old friends. She never asked questions. She had no children of her own, and she rarely went with him. But one detail stuck out. Lucille remembered Harold once returning from a trip in 1995 with a sprained wrist. He claimed he'd slipped while carrying a washing machine, but she remembered seeing scratches on his neck, like fingernails had raked him. She remembered the way he avoided eye contact for days. She remembered a smell like damp soil and metal. The FBI theorized that sometime between 1983 and 1995, Harold had taken at least one more girl and somehow kept her alive for a while, maybe longer. Agents investigated abandoned properties he'd visited, motels, storage units, cabins. Several were in ruins. One was beneath a different name entirely. In one such cabin in rural Idaho, they found something else, a child's drawing stuck to a fridge with a rusted magnet. It depicted a stick-figure girl and a man holding hands beneath a crooked sun. The girl had a red balloon. The man had no face. On the back, scrawled in uneven handwriting, I miss my real mom. The FBI released the drawing to the public. No one claimed it. Back in Brindle Lake, news of the investigation reopened wounds. Residents who had buried the horror were forced to face it again. A town historian, Matthew Rudd, began compiling everything he could find about Anissa's case and those potentially connected to Bertrand. He uncovered newspaper clippings, police logs, even transcribed calls from the original tip lines. One stuck out. An anonymous tip received in 1984. It had been dismissed at the time as a hoax, but now it took on new meaning. The voice on the line said, "The girl in red was taken by someone who said he was a friend of her father." It was never traced. Dale, Anissa's father, was re-interviewed. He denied knowing anyone named Harold. But when shown a photo of Bertrand in the 1980s, thinner, younger, mustached, he paused. "I might have seen him once," he admitted. A guy who stopped by the shop asked about carburetors, weird eyes. Another lead emerged. In a storage unit in Nevada, rented under one of Bertrand's aliases, agents found a box of children's books. Inside one of the books, tucked between pages, was a hospital bracelet. The name read April M. No last name. The hospital was real, in Colorado. When they reached out, the hospital provided a single intake record from April 1986. A child brought in for a fractured wrist. No guardian listed. A man had dropped her off, signed Uncle, and never returned. She was taken into the state's foster system. She was never officially named, only referred to as April M. And she vanished from the system 4 months later. The foster family had no idea where she went. One night, she was gone. The back window of the home was found open. No forced entry. The case had gone nowhere. Now it was reclassified as an abduction. DNA from the hospital's stored blood sample was degraded, but partially usable. It did not match any current databases. But the girl in the photo from 1993 looked eerily similar to a sketch artist's rendering of April M, aged forward. Had Bertrand come back for her? Meanwhile, another clue surfaced. A woman named Erica Lytle from Tucson contacted the tip line. She said her late husband used to run with a group of off-the-books truckers in the 80s. One of them, she recalled, was nicknamed Radio Silence Harold. He refused CB chatter, kept to himself, drove long nights without rest. She remembered once at a truck stop, Harold had arrived with a small trailer in tow. He'd claimed it was hauling generators, but she peeked inside when he went to the bathroom. There was a mattress, a blanket, and drawings taped to the walls. She hadn't said anything then, thought it was weird, but not criminal. But now, she was sure it had been him. FBI scoured records again. They located the trailer, sold in 1996 to a scrapyard. Most of it had been dismantled, but inside the walls, when the frame was pried apart, they found initials scratched into the wood. HCMSTJSAH, of course, was Anissa Hope. The others, unknown, until they matched one to a 1985 missing child in New Mexico, Caitlin Marks. Another case closed, another child accounted for, another photograph explained, but that left two unknown initials. The sixth child, the one he claimed was still alive. Public pressure mounted. The FBI created a dedicated task force. They reopened 42 cold cases in 19 states. They interviewed every surviving trucker who knew Harold. They checked shipping routes, motel logs, rest stops, and they got one final break. In 2003, A woman named Lydia Kern was arrested in northern Utah for credit card fraud. During booking, her fingerprints were flagged. They didn't match any known Lydia Kern, but they matched a missing child case from Illinois, 1987. Sophia Talley, age 9 when taken. Her photo was among those in Bertrand's trunk. She was the 6th, still alive. The FBI flew in immediately. She was malnourished, confused, reluctant to speak. She had been living under aliases for years. She changed her appearance frequently. She'd been on the run since age 16. Eventually, she opened up. She said she didn't remember her real name until she was a teenager, that Harold called her Olive, that he told her she'd been abandoned, that her parents didn't want her. He kept her in a trailer at first, then a cabin, always moving, always cold. He let her draw, let her read, but she was never allowed to leave. Sometimes he hurt her, sometimes he was kind. He kept the others separate. She wasn't allowed to speak to them. She said she heard crying through the walls sometimes. She was there when Anissa was brought in. She remembered the red coat. She said Anissa cried for 3 days straight. Then one day, she was gone, just gone. Sophia never asked what happened. She was too afraid of the answer. Sophia had escaped at 15 during a grocery run. Harold left her alone in a car for 3 minutes. She ran, never looked back. She never went to the police. She was afraid no one would believe her. She changed her name, got fake documents, survived however she could, and for years she thought maybe she'd imagined it all. Until she saw Anissa's face in the news. Then the dreams came back. The red coat, the man with the fake smile, the cold silence of snow-covered woods. The case was finally closed. Bertrand was confirmed to have abducted at least 6 children, possibly more. 5 died. 1 survived. Sophia, now in her 30s, lives under witness protection. She's begun therapy. She testified to help solve other open cases. Lucille Bertrand moved out of the home where she once lived with the monster. She never remarried. Brindle Lake named a library wing after Anissa. Her mother, Patricia, attended the dedication. She lit a candle and read from her daughter's childhood diary. The last line Anissa ever wrote was, "I want to grow up and be the kind of person who helps lost people find their way back." Today, Anissa's face no longer appears on milk cartons, but her story still echoes softly, quietly, through the winter air. And every snowfall in Brindle Lake brings with it the memory of a girl in a red coat and the secret she carried into the cold. Story 2, The Freezer Case, Marie LeClaire's silent house. Neighbors said the house was empty. So why did a delivery man hear banging from the basement? And what was humming inside the locked freezer? For 17 years, Marie LeClaire's house was the quietest one on Maple Lane. It sat at the corner of the cul-de-sac in Stillwater, Vermont. Its windows always dark, its porch swept clean, the yard trimmed but lifeless. Children called it the Mummy House. Adults just shook their heads and said, "That old woman lives alone." If anyone had seen Marie in the last decade, they couldn't remember it. She didn't come to town meetings, didn't shop at the grocery store, never got mail. Her utilities were on auto pay. Her trash bins never went to the curb, but no one really noticed. In a town of fewer than 1,800 people, life moved slowly, and the past had a way of fading gently, like breath on a cold window pane. Marie LeClaire had once been a high school history teacher, the kind that made kids sit up straighter, strict but fair. She retired in 1998, the same year her younger sister Ruth died in a car accident. After that, Marie stopped coming to church, stopped volunteering, stopped answering the door. People assumed she was grieving, that she'd withdrawn. And in a way she had, but not in the way they thought. It started with a strange complaint in the winter of 2015. A new delivery driver, Curtis Mullins, was bringing a standing freezer to Marie's house, an online order from a warehouse, paid in full, curbside drop-off. But when he rolled the freezer up the walkway, he swore he heard banging coming from inside the house. Faint, rhythmic, thud, thud, thud. He knocked. No answer. Then he thought he heard crying. Curtis called his supervisor. His boss told him to just leave the unit. But Curtis filed a report anyway. Said the place felt wrong. That it was too quiet, but too loud. The report was logged and ignored. 2 years passed. Then came the blackout. On December 3rd, 2017, an ice storm rolled through Stillwater, knocked out power for half the town. Most homes were back online in a few hours, but Marie's place stayed dark for 3 days. When power was restored, a surge tripped several fuses in her home. Neighbors said they saw sparks through the windows. One claimed to smell smoke. The fire department was called. They broke the front door just after dusk. What they found stopped them cold. The house was perfectly preserved, dustless, spotless, no sign of decay. Dishes stacked neatly, books aligned by author, furniture covered in sheets. But no one came to the door. No sign of Marie. Then, down in the basement, they found the freezer, locked, padlocked, humming. They cut the lock. The lid creaked open. Inside were the remains of a woman, preserved in the frost, arms crossed over her chest, eyes wide open. A note was pinned to her blouse. It read, "Please do not disturb her. She is at peace. I cannot say the same for myself." The house was immediately sealed. Police were called. What followed became the most disturbing criminal case Vermont had seen in 50 years. Marie LeClaire was not in the house. She was not in the basement, not upstairs, not in the yard. But evidence suggested she had lived there recently. There was food in the fridge, laundry neatly folded, a kettle still warm on the stove, and most disturbingly, the freezer had been plugged into its own dedicated generator. She had wanted it to stay cold no matter what. Autopsy revealed the body inside was Ruth LeClaire, dead since 1998, the same year Marie had vanished from public life. The sisters were close, lived together after their parents died, never married, never moved away. Ruth had been a nurse. Marie, the teacher, no children, no living relatives. They were the last of their line. Police reopened old files, dug into town records, searched the house top to bottom, and the more they found, the worse it got. In the attic, behind a false wall, detectives found 17 journals, all belonging to Marie, dated from 1984 to 2017. They chronicled everything, but not as a diary, as a ledger, a list of sins, a confessional, a war with herself. The early entries were mundane, observations on students, frustrations with curriculum changes, grief over losing her mother. But then the tone changed. In 1986, Marie began documenting dreams. Dreams of Ruth standing at the foot of her bed, pale, bloody, silent. She began to write that Ruth had a darkness inside her, that she wasn't the same after their father died, that she would whisper strange things in her sleep, that she watched Marie with dead eyes. In one entry, Marie claimed Ruth had confessed to doing something at the hospital, something terrible. She wrote, Ruth said she helped the pain go away. Not just one patient, 3, 4, maybe more. She called it mercy, but her smile didn't match her words. Marie suspected Ruth had been euthanizing patients, illegally, quietly, and she didn't report it out of fear or guilt or love. Then, in July 1998, just weeks before Ruth's official death, Marie wrote something chilling. She asked me if I would do the same for her when the time came. I didn't answer. That same month, Ruth was in a minor car accident, not fatal, a fender bender. She walked away with a bruised shoulder, but within 2 weeks, she was dead. The cause of death was listed as carbon monoxide poisoning, a malfunctioning furnace. Tragic, but not suspicious, except the autopsy done in 2017 told a different story. Ruth had been drugged, high doses of lorazepam and morphine, too high for prescription, lethal. Someone had put her to sleep and then staged the scene. Police concluded Marie had killed her sister, but the question was, why freeze her? Why keep the body for 19 years? The journal suggested a grim obsession. Marie had become convinced that Ruth wasn't fully dead, that her soul lingered, that her darkness hadn't been buried with her. She wrote of hearing footsteps, of smelling hospital disinfectant in the kitchen, of Ruth whispering her name from vents. She wrote, "She is colder now, but no quieter. I locked her away, but I do not think she's locked in." Then the letter started. Police found dozens of envelopes in Marie's writing desk, unmailed, stamped, addressed to unknown names. Each began with, "To whom it may concern, if I do not stop her, she will start again." Most were rants, fragmented, disturbed, but a few told a different story. They spoke of visitors, unwanted guests. 3 names were repeated: Lenore Winslow, Peter Aldrich, Clara Vance. None lived in Vermont. None were in the phone book. Investigators ran the names. All 3 were confirmed missing persons from the late 1990s to early 2000s. All were last seen traveling through New England. All had booked overnight stays through newspaper classifieds. Marie's house was listed in archived print editions as a bed and breakfast, briefly, from 1999 to 2002. The B&B had no business license, no reviews, no receipts. It had only run 3 ads, each one around the time the missing persons vanished. Investigators brought cadaver dogs. They found disturbed soil beneath the shed. 3 sets of remains, 2 male, 1 female. Dental records matched all 3. Lenore, Peter, and Clara, all buried within 6 feet of each other, all poisoned with the same drugs found in Ruth. Marie had been killing guests, keeping the freezer humming for her sister upstairs, and digging graves for strangers out back. But why? The journals hinted at her unraveling. She believed Ruth's spirit had become parasitic, that Ruth fed on the weak, the lonely, the unremarkable. Marie wrote, "She whispers names to me, people I've never met, and then they knock. When I let them in, she sleeps longer. When I don't, she wakes angry." Marie had been luring in travelers, feeding them, drugging them, burying them, not out of hatred, out of fear, out of sacrifice. In her final journal entry, dated October 21st, 2017, Marie wrote, "I can't do it anymore. She's restless. I forgot to turn the generator on last night. The power flickered. I heard her scream. If anyone finds this, I am sorry. I did my best to contain her, but the cold is failing." Marie was never found. No evidence of her body, no blood, no suicide note. Some believe she fled into the woods. Others believe she finally joined her sister in the freezer. But one final detail remains. When police dismantled the generator room, they found a wall covered in writing. Dozens of names, dates, cities, most were nonsense, except one, written over and over again in neat cursive. She was never in the freezer. To this day, the LeClaire house remains abandoned. No one will buy it. No one stays inside after dark. And sometimes, neighbors say the generator still hums, though there's no power. And if you stand real still at the basement window, you might hear it. That soft, cold knocking. Thud, thud, thud. Story 3, The Mother in the Walls, the Whitlow House Murders. The Whitlow children said they could hear the mother's voice through the walls, even though she was buried in the backyard. The Whitlow family moved into the old red farmhouse in early spring of 1996, before the snow had melted completely off the Vermont hills. It was the kind of place people described as charming and full of character. A creaky 19th century clapboard house with sloped ceilings, worn banisters, and an oil furnace that groaned through the night. The kind of house where floorboards remembered your steps and cold air leaked in like it had a mind of its own. They came from Hartford. Eric Whitlow, his wife Marla, and their 2 children, Matthew, age 10, and Sarah, who had just turned 6. Eric had taken a job managing a lumber mill out near Stowe. He wanted land. Marla wanted quiet. The kids wanted snow forts and space to roam. The house had everything they asked for: 4 bedrooms, a wood stove, a backyard pond, and 10 acres of forest. The price was almost too good to be true, and maybe that should have been the first sign. The second sign came 3 weeks after they moved in, when Sarah told her mother that someone was whispering to her through the air vent in the upstairs hallway. "Is it Matthew?" Marla asked, annoyed but amused. Sarah shook her head. "It's a lady." Marla chuckled. "What did she say?" "She said she misses me." The mother brushed it off. Kids had vivid imaginations, especially in strange, creaky houses with empty rooms and shadows that changed shape. It was nothing, just settling in. But in came the third sign, the knocking. It started late at night, around 2 or 3 a.m. Sharp, deliberate taps in the walls, always in threes, always from behind the headboard in the master bedroom. Eric checked the crawl space. Nothing. No rodents, no loose pipes, just silence. Until the next night. Thud, thud, thud. Marla began waking with nosebleeds. Eric started grinding his teeth in his sleep. The kids, once excited by the country life, now refused to go upstairs alone. By mid-April, things got worse. Sarah told her father that Mommy was floating. "Floating? In the hallway," she whispered, "at night." Marla laughed it off when he told her, "Kids and ghosts, maybe I'll write a book." But that was before the phone calls. Eric began receiving static-laced voicemails at work. Long pauses, breathing. Then a voice, soft, unmistakably female, saying the same thing every time. "Why did you let me die?" The calls were traced. No origin, no call history. Tech support blamed a possible glitch in the voicemail system. Eric didn't believe it. Marla started acting distant. She stopped answering calls, stopped going outside. Her laughter disappeared. And then she vanished. May 3rd, 1996. Eric left for work at 6:30 a.m. The kids were still in bed. When he returned at 5:10 p.m., the house was quiet. Marla's car was in the driveway. Her purse and coat were inside. The back door was locked from the inside, but she was gone. Eric assumed she'd gone for a walk, maybe to the neighbors, though the closest house was nearly a mile away. He waited. He called friends. He checked the shed. He checked the attic. No Marla. At 9:13 p.m., he called the police. Search teams combed the woods. Dogs picked up a scent near the back porch, but it stopped at the pond. Divers were called. Nothing. Weeks passed. No note, no footprints, no credit card activity. It was like she had evaporated. Eric grieved, but something didn't sit right. He knew his wife. She wouldn't abandon the kids. She wouldn't leave the stove on, her book open, the dog outside, the door locked behind her. She had planned to make shepherd's pie that night. Then, silence, until the children began hearing her again, through the fence. Sarah told her teacher first. "We'd talk at night," she said. "Who?" "Mommy, from the wall." The teacher smiled and nodded, but Sarah didn't smile back. "She's cold in there," she added. "She wants me to let her out." The teacher called Eric. He took the kids home early. That night, he searched the house from top to bottom, and that's when he noticed it. The pantry shelves had scuff marks, like something heavy had been moved repeatedly. Behind the shelves, hidden by wallpaper and shadow, was a narrow door, one he'd never seen before. It opened into a crawl space between the pantry and the outer wall, dusty, cobwebbed, smelling of old earth and something else, rot. He followed the narrow corridor. At the end, a second hatch. Behind it, a bricked-over recess, sloppy work. Cement still flaked to the touch. He fetched a sledgehammer. It took 10 swings. On the 11th, the wall crumbled, and there she was, Marla, kneeling, hands bound behind her back, eyes wide open, mouth sewn shut, perfectly preserved in plastic sheeting. The police arrived within the hour. Eric was arrested. But it wasn't that simple, because when they examined the crime scene, they found something chilling. The inside of the wall, the one Marla had been entombed behind, was scratched from the inside. Dozens of scratches, deep gouges, and inside her mouth, behind the black thread, was a note, written in blood. "She made me watch." The investigation took months. Eric denied everything, no motive, no history of abuse, no financial gain. But forensic evidence was damning. His fingerprints were found on the plastic sheeting. The twine binding her wrists came from the garden shed. His handwriting was on the label. Fibers from his shirt were found beneath her nails. The jury deliberated for just 2 hours. He was sentenced to life without parole. Case closed until 2004. 8 years later, Sarah, now 16, was admitted to a psychiatric hospital in Massachusetts after attempting suicide. During therapy, she made a confession. She said she remembered everything. She remembered her mother tying herself up. She remembered helping her sew her mouth shut. She remembered watching her crawl into the wall willingly. "She told me the house was hungry," Sarah said. "She said it wanted her. She said if she fed it herself, it would leave me and Matt alone." Doctors dismissed it as psychosis, but she insisted it was true. She said the house had rules: no running after dark, no mirrors facing windows, and never, ever open the pantry door after midnight. Sarah said her mother broke the last rule, and the house punished her. An independent journalist, Annika Gray, heard the story and dug into the case. She found the original house blueprints. There was no wall cavity behind the pantry. The space where Marla was found didn't exist. Structurally, It wasn't supposed to be there. She interviewed Sarah, who had since been released. Sarah showed her a sketch her mother had drawn in 1996. A circle, an eye in the center, surrounded by teeth. It lived in the walls, Sarah said, and it doesn't like to be ignored. In 2006, Matthew Whitlow, now 20, was found dead in his dorm room. Cause of death, asphyxiation. No drugs, no trauma. His lips were sewn shut, no suspects. The case remains open. The Whitlow house was sold to a developer in 2007. Demolition was scheduled for spring, but workers refused to finish the job. They reported hearing whispers from the basement, laughter through the pipes. 3 workers quit. 1 went missing. His boots were found in the crawl space behind the pantry. His body was never recovered. To this day, the land remains vacant. Locals say on cold nights, you can still hear knocking from where the kitchen used to be. Always in threes, always behind the wall.